So you may not have heard, but Congress just approved $858 billion in military spending. That's $45 billion more than President Biden actually asked for. And that's $90 billion more than last year's defense bill. So just to recap, we ended two wars and somehow we're still increasing our military spending by absurd amounts. Remember all the times that progressive politicians have been asked, how are you going to pay for it? When they're discussing healthcare, affordable college tuition, infrastructure, literally any other issue that would benefit Americans. Yet no one asks how we're going to afford $858 billion in military spending. We spend more on our military than the next 9 countries combined. And based on this new spending bill, it's probably even more than 9 countries. This isn't just an issue about absurd spending. It's about where we spend our money and why. Today's global issues are not going to be solved by the US military. We need to invest more money in conflict prevention, good governance, and civil society support. As it stands, the Department of State and USAID, the diplomacy and development arms of our foreign policy, have to operate with a small fraction of the military's budget. Last year, for all of our diplomatic development and humanitarian aid work around the world, it was only appropriated about $65 billion. That $65 billion had to cover every embassy around the world, all of our ambassadors, all of our development programs, all of the humanitarian and natural disaster response, and all of our support for governments around the world. We spend less than 10% of the military's budget on all of that, and we wonder why we aren't seeing the results that we want to see. We desperately need to rebalance our foreign policy to invest more in diplomacy and development and less in defense. There are several protracted conflicts around the world right now, and they are causing serious humanitarian crises and global displacement. There are now over 100 million people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes. And many of these people will not return home for at least 2 decades, if not more. And many of these people require significant international aid, which carries a high cost. The global challenges we face today are not ones that could be solved by our military. We're not sending our military into countries around the world to resolve conflicts, protect people from human rights abuses, or respond to famines and droughts. And when we do send our military to certain countries, it's not clear that it actually has a positive impact. The Department of State and USAID spend a lot of time and resources monitoring and evaluating their programs, ensuring that money is being spent wisely, and that at the end of the program, there's a net positive result. They talk to beneficiaries in country, they learn from their programs, and they try to decide, if it has a positive or a negative impact, what the aspects were, and then how they can change the program going forward. Our military is not held to the same standard. There's virtually no oversight. There's no evaluation. Our military can throw more money and bombs at a problem without ever really assessing if their efforts are working. We've seen this with the war on terror and bombings in Somalia, our bungled efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq, and countless other places. Hell, we don't even effectively monitor how many civilians we are killing or how many people we're pushing towards extremism with our kinetic actions like drone strikes. Not to mention the cavalier nature that we have with regards to international humanitarian and human rights law. People need to be paying attention to our foreign policy and where politicians choose to spend our money. Every election, foreign policy tends to be one of the least important items for voters, yet we're spending nearly $1 trillion a year on our military, and we have virtually no evidence to suggest that our military operations abroad are successful and result in positive outcomes. The only way this changes is if voters make this an issue that they care about. This is a bipartisan issue. Remember, Democrats are in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House right now. We can't blame Republicans for this massive increase in military spending. Both parties are guilty. Our budgets reflect our priorities, and consistently, our priorities are out of whack. So long as we keep spending an inordinate amount of money on our military, we will continue to have a military-first approach to our foreign policy. This colors the way we look at the world and how the world looks at us. How we engage globally has a direct impact on people's lives. And instead of being known for engaging in violence around the world, the US could be seen as a force for good, partnering with civil society and change makers, providing aid, building infrastructure, ending poverty, etc. The old adage, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, perfectly describes our current predicament. Our military is the $858 billion hammer, and everything looks like a nail to policymakers. We need to get out of this mentality or else nothing is going to change. It's time people start paying attention. Foreign policy can no longer be a back burner issue for voters.